'Cause fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Are you living in the gap? Then stop. Hey everybody, Joe Simons, Like Diamonds, back again, Salt Strong Unchurched. And no, I'm not talking about the Gap, the retail store. Of course, no one's living in there. I'm talking about something way more profound, way more important, and really critical to our happiness and to our growth. I did not realize how many times and how much of my life and even part of my attitude was living in the gap until I read this book. It's called 10X is Easier Than 2X by Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. Wow. Great book. And as you can probably tell from the title, it's a personal development. It's how world-class entrepreneurs achieve more by doing less. And 10X, as you can imagine, if you were here, you want to get to here, 10X, they're saying it's actually easier than 2X. And a good example would be, hey, if you're trying to raise $1 million, a lot of times it's easier to go find one really wealthy person with $1 million and wine and dine them, versus finding 100 people with $1,000. And I just did the math wrong. Or 1,000 people with $1,000. I was told there's going to be no math here today on this podcast. But you see my point. So many of us do so many little small things to get to this goal. And instead of looking, all right, what's the one big rock that we can push over? But I digress. That's not the part of that I want to talk about in this book. It's about halfway through this book about becoming a 10X leader and just a 10X person in general, a 10X husband, a 10X wife, a 10X employee. They start talking about the gap. And here's what the gap is. It's the lens by which you measure yourself against. And in the case of the gap, and there's an antithesis as well to this, an opposite. The gap is measuring yourself against some future thing, something that you think you should be, some way, big goal way out in the future. For instance, let's just say you had a goal to lose 30 pounds, which is a great goal, right? There's nothing wrong with setting a goal like that. But if you only obsessed about, hey, I'm behind this week, I still haven't lost my 30, and then another week or a month goes by and someone asks, hey, how's it going? And you only obsess, oh man, well, I'm just still way off my goal. But you don't look back and say, well, gosh, I just lost 6 pounds this week. That's huge. That's monumental for so many people. And yet so many of us get caught up. Instead of celebrating these small wins, we live our lives in the gap, and the gap is essentially the distance between where you are now and where you think you should be. And there is story after story in this book. It was eerie because I'm finding myself doing some of this same stuff where these entrepreneurs in particular who had really big goals and always dreamed, hey man, by the time I hit 60, I was going to be worth this much and my company was going to be doing, let's just say 100 million or whatever it is. And they're only at 80 million. And they literally get depressed by it because they had put so much emphasis on how they measure themselves against where they think they should be. And when a friend says, hey, how's it going, Bob? And he's like, oh man, I'm 20 million off from where I should be. And it's literally just like suffocating all of the happiness and dreams because all they're doing is dwelling on the negative, that there's that gap between 80 million and 100 million, where we're all looking at that guy saying, man, I would give anything to be where he is, to have a company that's doing $80 million in revenue, right? You see where I'm going with this. And yet so many of us, including yours truly, which is why this one hit home for me, we live in the gap. And I'm going to tell you a quick story. So every month I attend a C12 event in Orlando. And C12 is a Christian, I call it like a Christian mastermind group, if you will, with other Christian CEOs. and we get together and just do life together. Obviously, there's a lot of business talk, but there's also just personal talk. And in the beginning of every single meeting, we all rate ourselves and really just kind of take a second and say, all right, how am I really doing in marriage? How am I really doing as a leader? How am I doing in biblical world? How am I doing with my walk with God and finances and health and even just rest and vacation, having fun, right? Because there's some seasons where, man, finances are great and money's coming in and everything's going great on this side, but you haven't had any rest and retreat in months. So you haven't had date night with your wife in a month because you've been so busy burning the candles at both ends. And then after that, we rate ourselves on where we are in terms of revenue generation and just overall operations and how we're doing essentially as a company. And it's either, on target or ahead of target or behind. And oh my gosh, I'm embarrassed even saying this, but every single month, for 4 years straight, every month I have put, I'm behind. And it's because I'm measuring myself in the gap. I'm saying, well, here's where I thought we should be. And I'm literally like getting down on it when I should be thinking, man, look how far Salt Strong has come this past year, month, whatever it is. And instead, so many of us dwell on this gap of, oh man, here's where I thought I should be, right? Man, I thought I would be, more happily married at this point in life. I thought I would have my house paid off, or I thought I'd have this job, or I'd be at this title, or I'd be driving this car. And so many of us live in this gap, which does not breed happiness. In fact, it's proven here in this book where it does just the opposite. And really, I believe in this book really proves it why so many Americans are unhappy. We're living our lives in the gap of where we think we should be instead of trusting God that, hey, maybe he has me here at this exact moment in this same job with this same person or without this person, in this same role with the same amount of money for a very specific reason. And instead, we don't trust God. We're like, oh, here's where I should be. And we end up getting down on it. And many times go to material things, including yours truly. Wrote a whole book about, my problems with all this, just fishing for happiness. It was the title of the book. It was because I was fishing for happiness by buying new things and getting a nicer car and a bigger house, just thinking all these things were going to make me happy. And in reality, they didn't. They ended up making me miserable because I kept getting all this new stuff and just was drowning in it because I was trying to find the next kind of hit, if you will, that would make me happy. And a lot of you know Matthew Perry from Friends. He was Chandler. And I think we would all agree he's done pretty well for himself. Well, he wrote a book called Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing. And I'm just going to read a quote from this. And as a young kid, his whole dream was to be famous. He was not really happy and fulfilled as a teenager and into his early years. And his whole goal was to be famous. He thought that was going to cure everything, just to give you the kind of the background. So here, this is him talking. I was pretty sure that fame would change everything. And I yearned for it more than any other person on the face of the planet. I needed it. It was the only thing that would ever fix me. And I was certain of it. But the magic never lasts. Whatever holes you're filling seem to just keep opening back up. It's like a whack-a-mole. Maybe it was because I was always trying to fill a spiritual hole with a material thing. Guys, being in the gap, it is like an addiction. It is like a sickness. And like I said, this book goes through so many different examples of that. And the problem with it is these ideals, like where we think we should be at this moment in life, they're not stable. They're constantly changing. Think about it, right? 2 years ago, you probably thought you should have been somewhere else versus right now where you think you should be. And that's the problem. It's like a horizon in the desert. It just keeps moving out every single month, year, decade, etc. And we're never truly content with it. And so you might be wondering, all right, well, what the heck's the solution if we can't live in this gap? Because it is good to have goals, right? And it is good to have big dreams. I think we all know that. But if we're only living in the gap of where we are versus there, and that's how we're measuring and judging ourselves, that's a big problem. So what is the solution? Well, the opposite of a gap is a gain. And so a gain is a proactive, very creative and internal approach to measuring yourself and your experiences from where you came. So instead of measuring yourself forward, right, from like, hey, here's where I wanted to be, here's where I thought I should be at this point, that's a forward facing. You're basically measuring yourself backward against where and who you were before. And as Dan, he's one of the authors here, states, the only way to measure the distance you've traveled is by measuring from where you are back to the point where you started, not from where you are now towards the horizon that keeps on moving. And so by regularly measuring yourself backwards, you begin to view your past differently. You begin to see the wins and the gains, which is why it's called a gain versus the gap, that you normally wouldn't consider progress. And you start to glean more from your experiences, the good and the bad, and you end up squeezing more juice out of your experiences because while in the gain, you're the one defining what your experiences mean. While you're in the gap, your experiences are driving you. If things aren't really how you ideally thought that they'd be, then now you're the victim. In the gain, you're anti-fragile. Everything happens for you, not to you. Every experience, good and bad, has something to offer. And every moment you learn and become better, not bitter as a result. And of course, research from this book quotes quite a bit of it. It shows that happiness and positive emotions, especially gratitude, lead to more creative thinking and better decision making, higher performance, self-determination, and being in that gain radically boosts all of that, the positive emotions, gratitude, and appreciation. Whereas being in the gap does not. And I know it. I literally every month when I do that thing at C12, like afterwards, I'm almost like beating myself up. Like I go from being kind of happy to like, oh man, it's almost like a stressful moment for me. And so as I was reading this, I was like, man, I am like just detrimental to my own self by trying to measure where I am today, versus where I thought I should be, versus looking a little bit in the back and saying, man, Joe, you have come a long way, and really celebrating all of that. And here's a real big reason why, guys, if you're still not getting it. Wherever you focus expands, and whatever you see, you create more of. So if you're focusing on the gains in your life, you're going to begin to feel like you're always winning. Think about that, Tom. This is super, super important. Wherever you focus expands, right? As my friend Don, who I know listens to these, I mean, whatever you measure, right, is in track, that's what you're going to improve upon. If you're not measuring and tracking something, which means you're looking at it and studying it, it's not going to work. So wherever you focus on, so if you're only focused on this gap and you're getting down about it, you're just going to have more, because once again, that goal, that horizon is constantly moving. It never just stays the same. We're constantly putting bigger goals out there. So if you're focusing on good stuff, it does expand. Whatever you're seeing, you're going to create more of. So by focusing on the gains in your life, you will begin to feel like you're always winning. You'll begin to see and create more gains from every day and from every experience, good and bad. And consequently, you'll be able to create more gains every single day, versus when you're in the gap, that does not happen. You're just constantly just beating yourself up and not celebrating all of those small wins, both the good experiences and the what some would call bad experiences that you learn from it. Basically, everything becomes good when you're living in the gain of life. And so, here's some really good questions this book lists. And this is really, so I would personally write this down. I spend a lot of time just reading each one of these and just kind of looking over the past year or so of my life for each of these. So here are the questions. And this is how to get yourself into the gain, by the way, and away from the gap. So instead of just saying, oh yeah, well, I haven't lost my 30 pounds yet, or I'm not where I thought I would be in my job or my relationships, or, my kids aren't where I thought they'd be. Maybe I'm a bad parent. No, look at it this way. How have you grown as a person over the last year? How have you grown as a person over the last 3 years? What are the biggest things you've learned in the past 12 months? What are 10 important things you've accomplished in the last 12 months? Because keep in mind, when you start listing things like that, what are 10 important things that you've accomplished in the last 12 months? Now we're focused on all these little wins that, once again, what you focus on expands. So if we're focused on things that we've accomplished and done really well, what you focus on expands. You keep doing more of it, and you keep feeling like you're always winning, which, guess what? It builds confidence. That's one of the easiest ways to build confidence. And it's the same with my kids. When they get down, I'm like, oh, hey, what about this? Like, you literally aced this test last time. Like, that's how you build confidence, is thinking about the stuff that you've already done and accomplished well, not by looking in the future and saying, well, I should be here. Where. All right. What meaningful experiences have you had in the past 90 days? That's a good one, right? What meaningful experiences have you had in the past 90 days? Now, I'll be honest, to me, I've been such a forward thinker. Like, this was forcing me to slow down. And at first I was like, I couldn't even think of anything off the top of my head. Then it started flowing. And I'm telling you, like, my whole attitude changed. My thoughts on the future even changed. My thoughts about my present self changed, all by going back and answering some of these questions. Really powerful. How are you clear on your goals and vision today than you were 90 days ago? And how are you clear on your goals and vision today than you were 90 days ago? In what ways is your life different and better than it was just 30 days ago? What important progress have you made the past 7 days? Like, it's really, really specific. What progress have you made in the last 24 hours? So no matter where you're currently at in your in your process in your life, you're constantly making gains. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And yet, as I said, sadly, so many of us live in this gap stage. And so my thing that I'm going to work on is I'm going to go in the C12. And there certainly still could be times where, something's behind, but I will promise you it's not going to be for a 4 year straight where I'm going to say I'm behind where I should have been or where I thought I could be, because, man, we are doing amazing. We're doing things like, if you were at our opening here recently, and we had over 1,000 people come to our event. And so here's a great example. So we had our store opening. It's our very first store opening ever. So something we've literally never done before, and something we've talked about doing forever. We have a grand opening just for members only. We had over 1,000 people come, and we obviously sold a ton of tackle. I mean, tens of thousands of dollars of tackle. It was just an epic day with really amazing people. I got to meet so many of our awesome insider members who we treat like family. Like, I went home, even though I was worn out from, just all the talking, and obviously it was just a lot of work to get that. It was just one of those happy moments. And let's just say we'd had a goal of hitting 2,000 people, and we wanted to do $200,000 of tackle sales, and we didn't hit that, obviously. And living in the gap would have been like, I would have gone home poo-pooing, like, well, yeah, it was okay, but, half the people didn't show up. And no, man, you got to celebrate the wins and celebrate all those amazing conversations, all the amazing people that came, all the hugs and the high fives and the handshakes. I mean, every little thing there is a massive win. It's a gain. And fortunately, I didn't do that with this, but it would have been very easy for me or anyone to have really big goals about what you wanted to hit. Or, man, I thought we would have been here, and just kind of mope. And it brings everyone down around you. No one would have wanted to hear that from me if I'd said, yeah, it was good, but no, just get that out of your head. Get the whole gap out. Don't measure yourself up against something that is just constantly moving. And once again, great to have goals, critical to have goals. I mean, heck, this whole book is about 10xing. It's about growing, but the only way to really grow and the most consistent way to grow is to live in the gain and constantly be gaining towards those goals, celebrating the small wins and not living in that gap area. You will be so much more creative. Your confidence will be boosted if you live in that gain area of all the cool past amazing accomplishments and awesome relationships and great things that you have done. So hope that helps. Hope that made sense. It really hit home to me just because I was so guilty of living in the gaps from some of the things that we've done in C12. And so I hope it hit the right people. A lot of it comes down to just the attitude, right? And the mindset, just like we've talked about before. So I'm going to be living in the gains, my friend. I hope you do as well. And if you have any questions, thoughts, if you've been through something like this before, or if you have certain exercises or things that you like to do just to get you positive and to live in the gain, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. Joe@saltstrong.com. Otherwise, I will talk to you on the next episode.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was passed down to me from the days of old. To find us on the water if there was a way. It's been said my papa, he wrote the book on catching big reds and 20-pound snook. I wish I knew all the things he knew today. So